Welcome to my channel, and I'm back with you once again with another video of Microsoft Flight Simulator. Nowadays I'm exploring all the features of the Salty Simulations Boeing 747, which is a modified version of the Boeing 747 which comes with the Microsoft Flight Simulator. And this plane has got some additional features which I was trying to explore for the past few days, and I've done some videos which are there on my channel. If you have not watched those videos, you can just go and watch them. It covers actually a review for the Salty Boeing 747. Then I have the startup procedures, the cockpit lights, and plus the takeoff and autopilot tutorial for this plane. So right now I'm heading towards Islamabad International Airport. It's a short flight from Karachi to Islamabad, a 2 hours flight. And I will in this video take you through all the procedures that you are supposed to carry out while performing an ILS approach and a landing at an airport. Right now you can see the plane is flying at 38,000 feet, as you can see it over here in the MCP. It's 38,000 feet, and plus the top of descent is almost 150 nautical miles away. As you can see, roughly 164 nautical miles away. If you can just look at this page, if you go to the FMC, that is the flight management computer, and you press this button progress, you will see it. Let's do it again for the beginners. If you press progress, it will say 162 nautical miles to top of descent. So this is the distance that we have to cover before we start our descent. And that's it. So it's going to be a very nice approach and landing because the weather is really clear, and right now there are no clouds, so the visibility will be really good. I will be able to see the runway, as I'm very bad at landings, so kindly excuse me for that. Every video that I do for the ILS approach and landing, I tell my audience that always ignore the landings. They're going to be the bad ones. Okay, so we have to do some preparations before we start the descent and perform an ILS approach and landing. And in this, first of all, we have to decide the altitude to which we have to actually descend. You don't descend to simply 100 feet or 200 feet or 1000 feet. You don't get this number from the air. It has to be a logical number, and this number can be found out in the FMC. If you go to this option legs, which shows you all the waypoints in a flight plan, and you keep on pressing the next page, you will see all the points and plus the different flight levels and the speed at those points. So you can see that till Belco it's coming as flight level 380, which is 38,000 feet. And if you go to the next page, you will see ISDOR is saying 6,000 feet, and afterwards there is this waypoint. This is an error. You can ignore this. I don't know why it's coming like this. We can maybe delete I312, but otherwise just keep on going, and then you will find out that FI2RY, this is the final descent point, because I've been doing flights, too many flights to Islamabad International Airport. That's why I know that this is the final descent point. And there is another way of figuring out that how do you decide which is the final descent point. Just remember this thing, that this point is always the point before the runway, because obviously it's the final descent point. So you have to descend towards the runway after this point. So runway 28 right, this is coming over here, and this is the runway that I will be using to land. So runway 28 right, and before this FI2RY, and the altitude coming over here is 3,700 feet. Another point that I would just like to clear is this, that Islamabad International Airport is 1,790 feet above the sea level. So that's why you can see 1790 over here, 1,790 feet. So this is it, and this is the altitude that I will be setting in the MCP, and then once I will start my descent, the plane will start to descend to 3,700 feet. If you are using ATC or you are flying with VATSIM, obviously you will be getting instructions from the ATC about the altitude to which you have to descend. Another thing that you have to configure in the MCP is the heading of the runway. The runway is 28 right, so let's refer to the airport charts, and then from there we'll get the heading of the runway. I have the SimBrief or the Navigraph subscription, not the SimBrief subscription, because obviously SimBrief is powered by Navigraph. So I'm using the Navigraph charts, and I have them available with me in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you don't have the subscription, you can search the airport charts in Google by just simply typing the ICAO code for the airport, that's OPIS space airport charts, and you might get them, whatever the airport. But if you don't get them, then obviously you have to have a subscription for the charts, and it's very necessary. If you're doing flight simulations, you have to have the subscriptions, because you will be flying to different airports, and you will be referring to the airport charts, and it's very necessary to have them, because obviously without this information you won't be able to land the plane. Okay, so let's go to the charts list, and I have them over here in OPIS. And if I go for the approach, and if I select runway 28 right, now there are two types of approaches: ILS or localizer Z, RWY 28 right, runway 28 right, and Y. So I'm using this approach, LOCY, runway 28 right. And if I open the charts, you will see that the heading of the runway is coming over here, which is 278 degrees. There's some information that you can refer to in this approach plate. You can get this information of the ATIS 126.2. This is the radio frequency to get the weather information. So once I'm near this airport, I will be using this frequency to get the weather information, especially the barometric pressure, to adjust in the in the plane. Okay, and then Islamabad approach. This is the radio frequency for the approach, 121.650. As I will not be contacting the approach or the tower, so that's why I will not be using these frequencies. But if you are flying using the ATC or VATSIM, you have to dial in these frequencies in the communication panel, which is given over here. So this is the communication panel. Okay, now coming to another information, and which is the ILS DME. The ILS frequency is 110.7. As this plane already automatically picks up the ILS frequency, so that's why you don't have to enter it manually in the plane. But if the frequency is not picked up the plane, you have to enter it. But otherwise, for this plane, you don't really have to worry about it. As soon as you are near the runway, you will see the ILS indicators on the primary flight display. So 278 degrees is the heading of the runway. Another one, this is basically the ILS approach, or the decision height for the ILS approach, which is 1950 or 200 feet above the ground. So this is another information that we have to enter in the plane for the landing. What is the decision height? Actually, ILS is an automatic system which takes you or takes the plane directly towards the runway, and you are perfectly aligned with the runway. You're going to touch the runway at the exact point or the touchdown point exactly. But if at a certain height the pilot sees the runway is not properly aligned, or there is some issue, because obviously the human factor has to be there to make decision whether the ILS has properly aligned the plane with the runway or not. So at this height, the pilot can take a decision to call for a missed approach and then come back again and perform an ILS approach or manually land the plane. So this is the decision height that we have to enter in the plane. So 278 degrees, this is the information that we need, and plus the decision height is 200 feet. Okay, and mandatory, as you can see, DMA 6 miles before the runway, the mandatory altitude is 3,700, which we are going to set over there. So this is some basic information that we have to take. So let's go and enter 278 over here. It is not really required. You will see I will not be using it, but I will tell you why we enter this heading over here. Because as being a beginner, when I was flying planes, I never got the concept why do we set the heading over here if we are not going to use it. Because obviously once I'm near the runway, I will simply hit this button approach, and the plane will automatically start to descend towards the runway, and the heading is also set by the autopilot, so you don't really have to worry about it. It is required in case of a missed approach. So once you miss the approach, then you fly on the heading. So you don't use this VNAV option. VNAV option is actually LNAV option. LNAV option is the option which is actually telling the plane to follow the flight path and all the waypoints. But if you are not using the VNAV option, then obviously you're flying the plane on a heading. So that's why after the missed approach, the heading is required, or maybe just before the landing, you decide to deactivate LNAV and just fly towards the runway in a given heading, just to be more accurate and precise. So that's why this heading is required. But otherwise, in this video, you will see I will not be using this option. It is just an information that you have to enter. Just for the beginners, I'm telling you. But if you want to use it, you don't want to use LNAV and approach, then you can fly in this heading, and then you can land the plane manually if you want. So this is the information that we needed. And if you come over here, you will see these two options over here for the minimums, barometric pressure or the radio. So for this, as I told you before, it's a decision height. At this height, the pilot can decide whether to call a missed approach if not properly aligned with the runway. So that's why this decision height is required. So right now you can see it is set to radio 200. So what is the difference between baro and radio? If you set this option to baro, you will see 200 coming over here. But as you have seen from the airport charts, that the baro should be 1970, if I'm not wrong. Let's go and check. Let's go and check again. I think it was 1970, if I'm not wrong. Just to be sure, 1950. So this is actually the height based on the barometric pressure. This is how the plane is actually calculating the altitude of the plane, or the autopilot is calculating the height of the plane. But if you're using radio, then radio signals are basically used to gauge the height of the plane. So it's better to have radio, because radio is more accurate than the baro. But if you're using baro, then you have to enter 1950 over here. You can use this dial to change it, but otherwise it's advisable to use the radio. Sorry, I was doing it the wrong way. Set it to baro, and then you can set the barometric pressure. Okay, and if you press this button, it resets. But if you can move this dial, and you can set it to 1950, which is the altitude of the plane as per the barometric pressure. But if you use radio, then you can use it, and you can reset it to 200. It's automatically reset to 200, so no need to touch it. The decision height is there, and that's it. And one more thing, just before the approach, I will be using this knob to change the navigation display to approach. Over here you will see all the indicators for the approach. So during this approach, I will just take you through all the procedures. So right now, if you just go back to the progress page, and you make the yoke disappear, you will see 69 nautical miles to go for the top of descent. And at this point, I will actually start my descent to 3,700 feet. So let's change the altitude over here to 3,700. You can change it, and you don't have to really worry that the plane will start its descent till the time you press this button. You have to press it. So once you see this cursor of the hand, then you have to press it, and then the plane will start its descent towards the runway. So right now everything is looking good so far. We have we configured the MCP. We have entered the decision height, and plus one more thing that we have to do is this: go to FMC and go to this initialization page, and go to approach, and select your approach speed and flaps. So I will be landing with full flaps, that's 30 degrees, and the speed, or the VREF, or the approach speed, will be 143 knots. So if I press this button, and if I press it here, now the flaps and the speed is coming over here. So now the plane knows, or the autopilot knows, at which speed you will be landing. So you will see all this information on the primary flight display. And that's it. So now I will just wait for the top of descent, and as soon as I'm near the top of descent, I will start the descent towards the runway. Now I'm almost near the top of descent. So just before the top of descent, if you want to make an announcement for the passengers, you can do that. But with this, I will just start the descent, and plus I will also activate this button which says auto seatbelts. So we cannot set it to auto. As you can see, we can only turn it on. So as soon as I'll start the descent, I will turn on the seatbelt signs, and then the passengers will not be allowed to move in the cabin. It usually takes 30 to 40 minutes. Okay, so now you can see that the top of descent is within the range of 10 nautical miles. If you go to the progress, you can see that it's 11 nautical miles away. It's always good to start your descent exactly at the top of descent or just before it, because then you will be at a safe descent rate. But if you miss the stop of descent, then obviously it's going to be a problem. There are chances that you will be approaching the runway high and hot. Not only your altitude will be high, but your speed will be also very high. So that's why it's better to start your descent just before this point or on this point. So I will just start the descent right now by pressing this button, and you will see, as I've now set the altitude to 3000 feet, the plane will automatically start to descend. First now you can see the descent has started, and the thrust has been now reduced in order to maintain the speed of 270 knots or 0.84 Mach, as you can see it over here. With this, I would just like to touch another topic which is required for the landing. There are three ways or three forces they are combined to stop the plane on the runway. And one is the reverse thrust, the second is the braking system of the plane, and the third is the speed brake. So right now, while the plane is descending, I will just, did I turn on the seatbelt signs? No. Let me just turn on the seatbelt signs. As you can see over here in the ICAS, that the seatbelt signs are on now. Okay, and plus you can also see the progress to Islamabad International Airport, almost 117 nautical miles to go. The time is also coming. It's in UTC. Okay, so let's just touch this topic. It's very important. The reverse thrust, the brakes, and plus the speed brakes. There are three things that are combined together to stop the plane on the runway. Because the braking will not really work if you only rely on the brakes, you don't use the reverse thrust, you don't use the speed brakes, then there are chances, or definitely the brakes of the plane will heat up, and there are chances that the tires will get burst, and plus there can be a fire. So it's very dangerous thing just to use brakes during the landing. So that's why you have to use a reverse thrust. What is a reverse thrust? It's basically a procedure in which the engines are open and the thrust is reversed. If I just go out, I can just showing you during the flight. It should be actually shown once you land the plane, but just for the beginners, I'm just telling you. Right now, I have got one of the buttons on my controller configured for the reverse thrust. As soon as I press this button, can you see it? I think it will not happen during the flight. It's good. Otherwise, I remember there was a flight I was doing. It happened during the flight also. Oops, sorry. I think I have been pressing the wrong button. But anyhow, just look at the descent rate as I applied the speed brakes. The speed has increased. Okay. Now the autopilot will automatically try to configure it. So I thought it will happen. It happened before, but right now it cannot. So once I land the plane, I will show you. But just to give you an idea that once you have configured the reverse thrust on one of the buttons on the keyboard or the controller or the mouse, once you hit it, then the engines actually open and the reverse is thrust. The thrust is reversed. Thrust is reversed. Okay, it is reversed, and then the plane actually stops on the runway. Then for the speed brakes, if I tell you, just go and apply the speed brakes a bit. I'm just messing around with the flight just to tell you guys. So if I use the speed brakes, you will see, if you go out, you will see these flaps, up on the wings. These are actually the speed brakes used to reduce the speed of the plane in the air, and plus once it also lands. So if you have your speed brakes active, so after landing, as soon as you activate the reverse thrust, these flaps will come up, which will also create some drag and will help you to reduce the speed of the plane. So let's get back to the cockpit, and let's bring it back. Okay. So this is number 2, and number 3, you can see auto brake over here. We can set it to max. You can set it depending upon the landing performance calculator, because the landing performance is calculated on many factors: the weather condition, the runway, the length of the runway, the weight of the plane, plus the remaining fuel and stuff like this. So there are many factors which are required. If you are flying planes like Phoenix Simulations Airbus A320, or you're flying the PMDG 737-800 and Zibo, you can get the landing performance information, and you can enter it over there, and you can use that information to set your brakes and all the things. But right now, as we don't have a landing performance calculator, the only information that is available to us is the approach. We can only set the speed and the flaps, and that's it. So that's why you can just set the auto brakes whatever you want. I usually land with the maximum brakes. You will see the auto brakes are now coming as max. So right now, once you land and the plane's speed is reduced, the brakes will be applied, and the plane will actually stop in a shorter distance, rather than eating up the whole runway, because it can be dangerous. You can overshoot the runway and it will be dangerous to stop. So, and you have to also arm the speed brakes. If how to arm the speed brake: simply grab this lever and pull it up. You will see speed brakes are armed. So auto brakes are now set to max, and speed brakes are set to armed. So these are the two things that you have to do. That's it. We don't have to apply the speed brakes right now, because the speed is going to be under control, and as soon as the plane is below 10,000 feet, I will turn on the lights, and plus I will also start to extend the flaps, because flaps provide not only drag, which reduces the speed of the plane, but also provides additional lift to the plane and at the low speed. So with the flaps extended, you can go at a lower speed. But if your flaps are not extended, you try to go at a lower speed, the plane might stall. This was another innovative word, plane. Anyhow, that's the issue when you try to record the video in just one shot, because I've been telling in my other videos that I do a proper 9-to-5 job. So that's why I only get weekends to record these videos, and it gets very difficult to do the retake. So that's why I just sit down, try to record video in just one shoot. So if there are any errors, kindly excuse me for that, but I'm always trying to cover it up and cover all the information. I don't know why the gears are down. I think I pressed the wrong buttons. Okay, so that's it. Right now you can see the plane is descending at the speed of 1,900 feet per minute. This was really bad. The gears down. I didn't realize. I was actually pressing buttons on my controller, and it just happened when I was trying to show you the reverse thrust. So for the reverse thrust, coming back to the topic, I just realized that I didn't show you. If I go to this option for the controllers. No, I'll just let's do one thing. Let's go over here, and let's go to the controller options, and let's go for the Logitech Extreme 3D. This is the controller that I'm using for the flight, and the button 4 is set for the reverse thrust. So as soon as I land, I press this button, the reverse thrust is activated, and then I just perform the landing. So that's how it's done. You keep on pressing the button till the time the speed is 80 knots or below this. At 80 knots, you release the reverse thrust. So once I land, you will see it. Okay, that's it. And nothing else. 14,000 feet, as you can see. So at this point, let me see if we can get the ATIS and we can get the information. Nearest airport list, can I see it? OPIS and Islamabad ATIS. Let's get the weather report so that I can get the barometric pressure. QNH 29.97. Okay, so let's change this frequency and let's set the barometric pressure over here, 29.97. So let's set it over here. Now the altimeter is actually adjusted. The plane calculates its altitude based on the barometric pressure, which is outside. So that's why you have to do it. Once you reach the transition altitude, you have to change the barometric pressure. Before that transition altitude, it is always standard. So just to use standard, you press standard, and once you want to set it manually, you have to then go over here. How do you get the transition altitude? You go to the airport charts, and you can see the transition level is flight level 140, which is 14,000 feet. Okay, so this is how you get it. You go to the SID option, the star for the arrival, standard terminal arrival, and you see this information, flight level 140, which is the transition altitude for this runway. So as now I was below this altitude, so that's why I just set it to 29.97. Right now, as you can see, the plane is at 10,000 feet. That's why the speed is reducing, and it will be at 240 knots. And then once the plane is at 240 knots, again the descent will start. With this, I would just like to tell you the speed limits for different flap positions. At 285 knots, you can set the flaps to 1 degree, then at 265 to 5 degrees, 245 knots to 10. So right now, as the plane's speed is reducing to 240 knots, so I can extend the flaps to 10 degrees because the plane will be now flying at 240. So let's extend the flaps also to provide not only the drag, but also additional lift to the plane during the approach and landing. And you can see this thing, the plane speed is now at going to be at 240 knots, and the flaps are just getting extended to 10 degrees. Let's go out and see the flaps. The slats and the flaps are now up. You can see the slats and plus the flaps. The flaps are now getting extended. So that's it. So we are not in a very safe position right now. At ISDO, I should be at what should be the altitude at ISDO? It has just disappeared. Okay, but at ISDO, I should be. Let's refer to the star, and you will see it over here in the star information. Oops. At times there is a problem in the Navigraph charts. Okay. We should be seeing the constraints. Can I see data? Yes, okay. But I think, if I am not wrong, it is, I think 5,000 feet at is, or 5,000, 6,000 feet. Let's see if, I don't know, at times there is some issue in the Navigraph chart, especially when I'm recording the video. It knows that there is a problem. Now, right now you can see the ILS indicators have now started to also come, the horizontal and the vertical one. This tells you about your alignment with the runway, and plus this is the guide for your glide slope. So once this diamond is in the middle, then I will hit the approach button once I'm aligned with the runway. Right now you can see these diamonds are not in the center. This one should be over here, and this one should be over there. So right now this beep which you heard is this, that only 1,000 feet to go to level off. So the descent rate has been high, and due to which we are at 3,700 feet, whereas at ISDO I should have been at 6,000 feet, not below this. But as a precaution, just for this video, to be on the safe side, I said 3,700 because I thought the plane might miss it. So I didn't want any mishap to happen. But at ISDO I should have been at 6,000 or above. Right now I'm coming at 3,700. You can ignore it, but just remember, as per this information, you have to follow the constraints. And these constraints also disappeared. Actually, I'm used to flying the Airbus planes, because they follow the constraint properly. And as the constraints were coming in, so I thought, the plane will actually follow these constraints. So what the autopilot does is that as per the constraints, if I set 3,700, so if at a certain point it's 7,000 feet, it will not try to go below that point. Or below that altitude, so it automatically maintains that. That's the beauty of the VNAV option. But right now, I think in this plane, I don't know why these points disappeared. This information should be there, as we saw earlier in this video. So that's why the plane just descended below that given altitude. So this is a bit tricky. Your descent management, while you are flying a plane, you can really take a call that whether you should set it to 7,000, 6,000 for ISDO, or like you straight away want to descend to 3,700. I did a video before and I was higher than the given altitude at the final descent point, and we really had to descend at a very high rate to actually control this thing. So that's why in this video I just try to keep it at 3,700. It's always tricky, as I told you before. The Microsoft Flight Simulator knows that I'm going to record a video, so that's why these kind of things happen. But just to repeat my point, that you should not be below 6,700 feet or whatever the altitude is at this waypoint ISDO to follow the proper flight rules. Loading Navigraph charts, and they are loading and loading and loading and loading. Anyhow, we can just ignore it. I think I've made my point really clear. It's because I just really like the way people actually come and they point out issues, and that's why I told you before, I don't have enough time to do this flight again and do this thing without any errors. So kindly excuse me for that. I hope you can understand this point. So right now, at this point, ISDO, the plane will actually turn right and then left. And then another left point, left turn, and then we will be aligned with the runway. So just let's wait for it, and let's turn on the lights. I can this time wing lights, and I can turn on all the lights. So right now what I can do is this: I can further extend the flaps. Let's see what happens. The speed limit is over here. Let's see what happens. If I try to go to flap 20, will the speed also reduce? No, the speed will not reduce. So what I'll do is this: I will deactivate this option VNAV by pressing this VS button. Now it has disappeared, and then now I can reduce the speed. Okay, so let's keep it at 200. I can extend the flaps to, you can see, to 25 degrees. So right now it's set at 20. So it's good now. I've deactivated the VNAV. Actually, this VNAV option was controlling the speed of the plane and plus the descent rate. As now the plane is flying at 3,700 feet. There's no further descent. Only at the final descent point, I will just press this button, approach, and the plane will actually start to descend towards the runway. And then I will also lower the gears. Right now you can see the speed is at 200 knots. 3,700 feet is the altitude. This is some, I think, error in the flight plan. It shouldn't be doing this. I can try deleting it, but I think it will then mess up the plan. So let's just go with it. This is how it's been programmed in this plane. It is going directly towards CI2RY, ignoring this point. So the plane will then go to CI2RY and then turn left towards FI2RY. Okay, so the next is FI2RY. I think the plane should turn left. Yes, now it has turned left. I can further reduce the speed to 180 knots. I can extend now the flaps to full, because at 185 knots I can extend the full flaps. That is to 30 degrees. Now the flaps are fully extended. Let's go out and see what's happening outside. You can see the flaps are now fully extended. That's it. Okay, so now the plane will be aligned with the runway. As you can see, it's getting aligned. At this point, I can turn on this approach option. You can see this bar is coming in the middle, which means this bar. As you can see, it's coming in the middle, which means you are perfectly aligned with the runway. And your heading is also set 278 degrees, as I've shown you here. So as I'm not flying using the heading option, I'm just using the LNAV for the longitudinal navigation. So that's why we are not using this option, as I told you before. But right now you can see the heading will be set to 278 degrees. Okay, so the plane will actually adjust itself. This bar should be in the middle. Now FI2RY is coming. Progress. How much distance to go? Only 3 nautical miles, and with this I think I will be hitting the approach button, and then I will also lower the gears. So everything is good so far. The visibility is low, as you can see. You cannot really clearly see, but if you zoom in, you can see the runway. So only 1 nautical mile to go for the final descent point. With this, I can lower the gears. I can further reduce the speed to 140, and with this I can, as you can see, this diamond is in the middle. Now I can hit the approach button, and then you will see the plane will automatically start to follow the glide slope, which is 3 degrees. And if you go out, you will see everything in action. So the flaps fully extended, gears are down, and runway you can just see over here. Most of the time when I'm landing at Islamabad International Airport, the plane is not properly aligned with the runway. I think there's an issue with the ILS, especially with this plane. The plane is slightly towards the right side because everything shows in the middle, in the center, and once I am near, the plane is slightly towards the right side of the runway. I don't know why this thing happens, but I think you can just ignore it. So let's bring it to 145. Soon I will be disengaging the autopilot to basically perform a procedure which is known as a flare. At roughly 50 feet above the runway, I will just reduce the thrust, and I will pitch the nose up. This is known as a procedure which is a flare. You do it 50 feet above the runway. So everything is good so far. .500 feet above the ground. I think I'm properly aligned with the runway. So with this, I can disengage the autopilot and I can turn off the auto throttle so that I can handle the thrust. Let's reduce it a bit. .100 feet above the runway, and let's reduce the thrust, and with this I can press the button to activate the reverse thrust. You can see it over here that the reverse thrust is active now, and as soon as the speed is at 80 knots or below this, I will release this button and I will reduce the thrust. I can apply the brakes to bring the plane to a halt, and that's it. With this, after landing, you get the clearance for the for the taxiway and plus for the gates. So right now, as I'm not using ATC, so that's why I will just simply proceed towards any of the gates at the Islamabad International Airport, and that's it. So if I've missed anything, kindly point it out. Otherwise, I think I've carried out all the procedures. With this, I would just like to end my video. If you've got any questions, kindly ask me in the comment section. I will be more than happy to give answer to your questions. And if you've got any comments, the comment section is there for you. And hopefully you have learned a lot from these videos. And plus, I will be also trying to do a complete video for this plane instead of breaking it down into different parts. Just make one video for this plane, so that if you want to do a flight from one end to another one, a complete flight, this video might help you. Thank you very much for staying with me. Have a nice day. Hope to see you soon.